Howdy, all. Welcome on in. This is Goose Talks Film. I'm your host, Goose. And this week we are tackling the new release horror movie, Immaculate. Released about 4 weeks ago, starring Sydney Sweeney and also produced by Sydney Sweeney, which I think is great for her to be getting in that position at quite a young age, but also don't want to say inexperienced age, but pretty young in her career anyway. And is written by Andrew LaBelle and directed by Michael Mohan. I think I pronounced that correctly. So we'll be diving into this new horror release film. We've been quite lucky with the amount of horrors that we've got this year. It's actually pretty crazy the amount we've already gotten. And in terms of, and when I say high budget for horror, I'm talking just even a few million, because horror movies have just known to not be given any budget whatsoever. So I think it's phenomenal that we're getting, all these horror movies, some with quite substantial budgets for horror movies. The first Omen, which I'm hoping to cover once it comes on digital in the next week or two. They had a budget of 30 million. This movie, Immaculate, had 9 million. Sting, I think that's around about the same as this, around the 9-10 mil mark. That's due to be out in a few weeks, I think. It might have been pushed back. So, bear with me as well. I had to postpone this podcast by a few days. If you're a regular listener, you will know that I usually publish an episode around about 4 or 5 p.m. on a Friday, Australian time. But I had to push it back just because my voice just keeps dropping in and out with a cold. It's still not great, but I thought I want to publish an episode before the weekend ends. So we have Immaculate tonight, and then Tuesday, probably afternoon or early evening, I'll be doing Late Night with the Devil, which is another horror movie that also had a fairly decent budget. I think around about the same as this one, around the 9 mil mark roughly. It's actually an Australian production, starring David Dastmalchian. I think I pronounced that correctly. But yeah, that'll be released on Tuesday evening, South Australian time. So it's a great time to be a horror fan. If you're new, if this is your first episode or one of your first episodes on the pod, then make sure you go through the library. I've already covered quite a few horrors, and there'll be plenty more in the future. Until I branch out into Goose Talks Horror, which is a new horror movie podcast where I'll be covering old horror movies and then new release ones. That's later down the track. So just for the time being, if I have the opportunity to cover a horror movie, then that's going to be my priority, just because I'm a huge horror fan and they're really fun to cover on podcast. And Abigail, that'll probably, will probably be this week's episode on Friday. So yeah, spoiled as horror fans with the movies coming out, and also spoiled here if you're a listener on the channel and you love me talking about horror movies. But anyway, on to the movie Immaculate. It is a movie that's probably quite similar to the first Omen. I'm yet to see that, but they both cover very similar themes, set back in time, in a convent. I think both set in Italy, if I'm not mistaken, or at least partly set in Italy, and to do with the human body, humanity, and we'll get into that with Immaculate as well. Just a little caution or a warning, whatever you want to call it. This movie does delve into some pretty uncomfortable stuff and some quite triggering stuff. So if anything to do with the human body, the anatomy or pregnancy or kids or anything like that, I wouldn't recommend this movie, and I also wouldn't recommend to listen to the pod, because I will read the in-depth description of the movie, or the full plot summary, I should say. So yeah, that's your caution. And as we do on Goose Talks Film, I recommend a movie out of 3 categories, which is usually go see this at movies, wait until streaming, or don't bother at all. Unfortunately, I think I'm probably leaning more into the don't bother category. I haven't seen the first Omen. From what I can gather, that's a much better film from what everyone's saying, and also make up your own minds as well, guys. Make sure we support these movies. Go to the movies if you want to go to the movies. Don't not go because I said don't go. If you're going to go, be like, oh, Goose said no, so I'm not going to go. Then don't do that. If you're going to go, just go. I was kind of just do it for fun and just a recommendation I like to do. But if you're 50-50 and you're short on cash or you're short on time and you weren't sure if you were going to go, and I say don't go, and that makes your mind up for you, then completely up to you. That's fine. So yeah, so the short, spoiler-free synopsis is Cecilia, a woman of devout faith, is warmly welcomed to the picture-perfect Italian countryside, where she is offered a new role at the illustrious convent. But it becomes clear to Cecilia that her new home harbours dark and horrifying secrets. So this movie was quite, with the marketing, it was quite straightforward about, what it was going to be. Immaculate, obviously, the title goes into the phrase of Immaculate Conception, which is, deep in religious beliefs and whatnot. So, I mean, it wasn't hiding what it was about, but it was kind of hiding 100% on what was happening. And we'll delve deep into that once we hit the spoiler territory. Yeah, look, the reason why I wouldn't recommend is, I just think the first Iron Man looks like a much better film. They're both kind of out at the same time at the movies, and they'll also be hitting digital at the same time. I think Immaculate just hit on digital. That's how I watched it, and first Iron Man will be coming out next week. Look, this relatively did well at the box office. I mean, it made $21 million off a $9 million budget, and it'll do quite well on home video, or digital, whatever you want to call it these days, because horror always does quite well. So, yeah, I think that kind of hurt it a bit. The first Iron Man only just made a profit as well, but they had a bigger budget of $30 million. It made $38 million so far, I think. But, yeah, again, once it gets on digital, it'll make a bit more profit. I think this movie will turn off a lot of people as well, especially women that have either just given birth or they've been pregnant, or my wife as well. Like, we suffered a miscarriage and stuff, and anything to do with women being pregnant and like horror being set around that, and like this is a genre of body horror. And a lot of people don't like body horror because it's too real, and it delves deep into, things like pregnancy and vice versa. So I feel there's a lot of people who be turned off by that. And like I said earlier, if any of that, describes you, then I highly, highly do not recommend you watch this. It'll, definitely trigger some stuff. It will make you feel uncomfortable. It might give you some irrational fears, any of that stuff. And it's just not worth putting yourself through that to watch this movie, because it's just not worth it, because it's not a good film. So, yeah, but like I said, make up your own mind. If that stuff doesn't trigger you and you want to, try it for yourself, that's completely fine. You know your limits. You know you better than what I do. I just want to give people that warning. Just because when I watched this, obviously I knew that it was about pregnancy and, immaculate conception and whatnot. And my wife was going to watch it with me, but she did, as she always does with horror and thrillers, she doesn't really do horror very often, especially when it comes to violence and certain things. So she went into IMDb, looked at, all the subgenres and what it contains, because it is rated R. So, yeah, once she found out what happens in a few scenes, she said, I'm 100% I'll watch this. I said, that's fine. Like I said, we suffered a miscarriage a few years ago, and a lot of people will be similar, and, worse things have happened to them. So they want to watch this, that's completely fine. I do not judge anyone for that whatsoever. If you're a fan of Sydney Sweeney, then, this movie's for you. You get a lot of her. You kind of pretty much only really get her. We don't see really a lot of anyone else in any scenes that don't really feature her outside of the opening scene. But yeah, look, like I said, I'll get into that in the spoiler territory, but that's probably where I'll end it in the spoiler-free territory. Just give you a quick rundown of that. Look, if you're not squeamish about anything and nothing triggers you and you love violent horror movies, then this might tickle your fancy. It might, itch a scratch you have, because there are quite a few gruesome full-on scenes. If that's the type of horror you like, then yeah, that'll probably scratch an itch that you have. But other than that, look, if maybe you're into, religious set horror, then this may itch a scratch, but there are better ones out there, like The First Iron Man, The Nun, quite a few better ones out there. So, Anyway, that's it for that part of the podcast, and I will give you your spoiler warning now. Alrighty, so we'll now delve deep into Immaculate, which I've spoken briefly about, but now we can talk about everything and everything. And I will read the full, plot synopsis. Yeah, it's quite a long one, so please bear with me. I'll try to read slowly and clearly so you can still understand me with my voice cutting in and out. So hopefully you guys can understand the majority of what I say. I apologize if you don't, but here it is. Sister Mary sneaks into Superior's bedroom at night and steals a ring of keys to escape through the locked gates of the Roman Catholic convent. She is captured and knocked unconscious by 4 hooded figures. She later wakes up in a coffin and is buried alive. Sister Cecilia turned to Christianity at a young age after she nearly drowned in a frozen lake and was declared dead for 7 minutes. Convinced that God had saved her for a purpose, she receives an invitation from Father Sal Tedeschi to join a convent in Italy that tends to dying nuns in their last days. Cecilia takes vows to adhere to the evangelical counsels and becomes a nun, being declared with a rosary. She befriends Sister Gwen and is struck by certain oddities, such as an elder nun having scars on her feet in the shape of crosses. The convent's chapel houses what they claim is a holy nail relic that was taken from the cross on which Jesus was crucified. Cecilia is shocked to learn that she's pregnant, even though she's a virgin, and has never had relations with a man. The convent inhabitants begin to treat her as the next Virgin Mary, with many proclaiming the child is a blessing. Another nun, Sister Isabel, tries to drown Cecilia out of jealousy, saying that it should have been her. Cecilia throws up one of her own teeth and her health worsens. Her request to be taken to a proper hospital is denied by Father Tedeschi. Isabel dies after falling off the convent's roof as Cecilia is walking through the cloister. Gwen publicly chastises the convent superiors for turning a blind eye, but is then bundled away by Father Tedeschi and Deacon Enzo. At night, Cecilia notices that behind a painting of the Virgin Mary in her room, another nun had inscribed 2 Corinthians 11:14 on the wall, a hidden warning causing her to realize that something is wrong about this convent. Cecilia breaks open a drawer to read her file and is shocked to find information on the accident in her childhood. Hearing a woman screaming, she ventures further and is horrified to witness a hooded figure cutting out Gwen's tongue. An elder nun appears and silences Cecilia. She begs to escape, but the elder chastises her, saying she will never leave the convent. She tries to escape the convent by faking a miscarriage using a dead chicken, but the deception is exposed. She attempts to run before being forcibly brought back by Tedeschi and Enzo. Tedeschi explains that he was a geneticist before becoming a priest and used DNA samples taken from the Holy Nail relic to impregnate nuns in the hopes of ushering in a new Messiah. Until his success with Cecilia, Tedeschi's numerous attempts failed, often resulting in malformed fetuses. Tedeschi brands a cross into Cecilia's foot, a symbol also on many of the other nuns. Cecilia makes another attempt to escape. She beats Mother Superior to death using a crucifix, and shortly afterward her water breaks. She manages to strangle the cardinal with her rosary before dousing Tedeschi's lab in ethanol. Tedeschi arrives and tries to stop her through physical force, but Cecilia narrowly escapes by igniting the ethanol with a lighter. Tedeschi manages to break out of the laboratory after extinguishing the flames and continues to his pursuit against Cecilia, forcing her to flee into the catacombs under the convent. Cecilia finds Gwen's mutilated corpse along with a hole in the catacomb walls. Tedeschi finds her just as she is about to escape and a struggle ensues. Tedeschi tries to cut Cecilia's stomach open, but she stabs him in the throat with the Holy Nail relic, which she had previously stolen from the chapel. After exiting the catacombs, Cecilia agonizingly gives birth and bites through the umbilical cord herself. She is clearly horrified by the sight of the baby, which is heard making gurgling and growling noises. While gasping for air, Cecilia stumbles away to grab and lift a nearby rock, which she uses to crush the experiment. End of film. So yeah, I have a bit to talk about. As you could tell from the plot summary that, it's pretty full on, but yet I still found myself just bored. I just wasn't invested. Look, I watched this on a Saturday night just after tea. Is usually when I watch most of the movies. If I'm going to watch a movie at home, it's usually when I'm not working the next day. Have a bit of coffee, have a bit of food, and I'm all set. So it wasn't like I was tired. It wasn't super late at night. This movie finished at 9:30, 10 o'clock, which is not late for me. So I put it down to just the film itself, because in the past I've said that about previous movies, but I've been tired, it's been late at night, or been really busy and I've just collapsed out of tiredness or whatever, but this wasn't the case for this movie. Look, there's positives, but there's definitely some negatives. The opening scene I did quite like, with the first woman that tries to escape before we meet Sydney Sweeney's character, where she, steals the keys. We're not given any context, but it's one of those things where pretty soon enough you'll find out, okay, that's why she was doing this, is because of this and this. So that was fine. We didn't need any strong explanation from the get-go. So it's pretty fast-paced from the beginning. She grabs the keys, tries to escape. Quite gruesome. She ends up squeezing through the gate, and then what turns out to be nuns in the hoods grabs her leg and then snaps it across the bar. Then it cuts the title card, and then we get into the main story. I really did like the opening scene with, it was late at night. There was barely any light coming from the convent, and we have some nice long shots of her running in the front yard to get to the gate. A lot of fog. I've used the fog from the fog machine, but I really like that. It sets a good tone. That's what I liked about the first Nun movie. I love that. It really gives an old school horror feel to it, which is great, because these movies are set back in time. So it just really, that sits well with me. I thought it set a decent tone from the start, but unfortunately wasn't really met with, the rest of the movie, unfortunately. But I did, so this, so the opening scene kind of got me into it. Like, I was excited. I'm like, oh, well, this is quite cool. Like, I quite enjoy this scene, so I'm probably going to enjoy the movie. But as the movie went on, just the characters were bland. A lot of just the same old boring, cliched jump scares all the time, which is doing my head in with a lot of movies. Imaginary, which I covered a few weeks ago. Give it a listen if you want to give it a listen. If you don't, I understand, because the movie's trash. This is slightly better than that. So, look, it's not in the territory of Imaginary and Night Swim, which are so far the worst horror movies of this year. This is probably a bit better than that, and I feel as though people more likely enjoy this, but it's kind of its own worst enemy, in which I've already spoken about, is going to turn away a certain demographic of people because of the nature of the content of the film and the plot and whatnot, involving, pregnancy and all that side of it, and definitely the ending, which I think a lot of people are going to be quite, decisive about. But, there was a few phobias that they touched on at the start of the movie, which I thought was cool. Quite of your less known, your less common phobias, but there is a phobia of people in like cloaks and stuff that you can't see their face. It's kind of like a Satanist thing, or I think it also comes down to like a KKK thing for African Americans. So there's a fear of people in hooded clothing or cloaked clothing. Also, the main one is when the woman gets buried alive, is obviously claustrophobia, which I think a lot of us get to a degree in certain scenarios. So, they touched on that. What else was the other phobia? There's another phobia. Oh, kind of comes into claustrophobia, but not being able to leave somewhere. But that's kind of like a situational thing, not just a phobia. But so I thought that was cool. We're inside the coffin as it's being buried with her for probably, I want to say, a minute and a half, 2 minutes. So it's quite a lengthy time. It's not over the top long, but it's enough to kind of make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, and then it just, has a quick cut away. And I thought it was a nice touch just after that, with the main title card is playing, like the main opening credits, I should say, but I'll spit it out. And her screams a lot over the top, like they're playing music quietly, but her screams are the loudest part, which I think, that was a nice little touch. Set a good tone. Look, I don't dislike her, and I don't want to shit on anyone's career or anything like that. But I personally don't see all the fuss about Sydney Sweeney. Uh, I don't know if it's because she's quite attractive and guys are jumping on board with that, or people just really like her. Which is I'm not saying she's not likable or anything, but I didn't watch this because of her by any means. I would have watched this with or without her involvement. Like I said earlier, I think it's great that she's producing. She's getting into that side of it earlier on, and guiding her career in that sense. So that's really good. But there's a lot of similar cases, and all these actors have different avenues to get where they get in their careers. You have slow burns. You have ones that do the traditional thing of starting on maybe TV and then going into film. But that's kind of dying these days, considering that there's a lot more money in TV these days. But yeah, look, I think one is like Jennifer Lawrence. About 11, 12 years ago, she did Winter's Bone, which she got an Academy Award for, which kind of put her on the map a little bit, but not in the public main domain. And then she obviously got cast in Hunger Games, and the rest of history, she just became an overnight A-list sensation, which I was on board for her because she was really likable, but she played emotional characters really well. She played goofy characters really well. She's very likable in the press conferences and on like late night talk shows. With Sydney Sweeney, I don't feel that, but everyone's completely different, and I don't judge people for that. I think it's great that she's got a fan base, and I think that she's got the fan base behind her now, and she's also producing her own movies, which I think is really, really good for her career, like I said. So all the best to her. But just with her performance in this specifically, I just don't see the hype. And I don't know if she's going to be a horror mainstay by any means. She's done a little bit already. But this is definitely her first true horror, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. But, it's got a very beautiful setting of the convent. It's, I'm not... We might find out in the trivia later on in the episode, but I'm not sure if this is a real monastery or one they built or an old building that existed and they turned it into a convent for the movie. I'm not entirely sure, but it was very... equally beautiful, but also creepy in certain parts. Like I found the bath, like the bathroom / bathing area, was very creepy. The way it was lit, very old school design. Obviously, I thought, that was just creepy and eerie. And then certain hallways, and like when they get to the catacombs scene towards the end of the movie, I'll talk about that later. That was probably my favorite scene of the movie. And then we get to the confession box scene, which I thought was really cool. When she starts to not go crazy, because I think she's the only sane person there, but when she starts to see things and start to be affected by what's happening to her, she's going to confess to the cardinal or whoever he is, and he's not responding to her and just looks at her, and then he kind of, like, the confession box slowly gets really long, and then it blacks out, and then it just gets longer and longer, and she's getting confused and slight little jump scare. I thought that was really cool. That was effective. That was a nice little scene. Not sure if it's 100% something I've seen before, but I thought that was pretty cool. Nice use of a confession box as well. I always found them creepy. Never been in one, but I just find them creepy just from what I've seen in movies and like documentaries and stuff. But the convent setting was very cool. We spend 99.9% of the movie here. So it's really important if you're doing a movie that's pretty much 100% or close to 100% set in one setting. I think it's really important that it's a good one and it fits the story and like the movie that you're telling. Imaginary, that kind of takes place majority at this house, but it's a boring, normal, suburban, modern 2-story house. And, that's what it is. I'm not shitting on it, but when you have these movies like this, it kind of helps the setting and the horror. It's no different than like, a secluded, creepy old farm in a movie, or a church, or like this, like a convent, or anything like that. I think is really cool. And I can't help but compare this to the original Nun, which came out, just under 10 years ago, I think. That's a much better horror movie than this. I'm not saying that's a masterpiece by any stretch of the imagination, but, that was the same thing. That was set at like an old castle that was turned into a convent. And that was, on a hillside, had a cemetery next to it. Most of the scenes are at night time. A lot of fog machine use, which was great. I think there a lot of parallels. The only thing I think is different is this movie's a lot more populated with people, even though if they're creepy or not. There's still a lot more people in this movie, so it doesn't feel as though it's as secluded. Even though, geographically it probably is, because we see when Sydney Sweeney's character tries to run away in the field, it's just kind of nothing for ages. But in terms of the desperation of characters and like the real horror of their situation, I feel as though in The Nun, there's only not even like a handful of people really involved, whereas there's over 30 people in total. So that kind of took away from, the dread of it, the being away from humanity side of it, even though the people that she's with, majority of them are either oblivious, brainwashed, or they're part of the problem. But yeah, I can't help but compare this to The Nun, and it doesn't come off well. Doesn't come off favorably at all, unfortunately. And as I said a bit earlier, there's a lot of just cliche jump scares I'm just getting really sick of now. Yeah, it's gotten to the point where, for years I was like, I would just shrug and be like, they tried, oh well. Now it's got to the point like everyone's just doing the same thing. It's like, come on, if you're going to do a jump scare, try and do something different. Different directors have done different jump scares in the past, like Barbarian, only a year and a half ago, had different jump scares in it. Even The Nun had different ones here and there. I feel as though they were cliche. Some of them were cliche as well, but a bit more. The execution was a bit more better. These, I can't say the same thing. I don't even have to describe them. I know that most of you guys will be able to picture them in your head, like what I'm talking about. Just the typical same old boring bullshit jump scares. I'm just over. You don't need to do jump scares to make a movie scary. I feel as though they're like probably the least impressive and least effective form of horror in a horror movie, is because it's, click your fingers and it's over, and it doesn't really have much of an effect. But if you can create a story, characters, setting, and all this stuff builds horror slowly, fast, it doesn't matter. But all these different cogs in the machine are all adding to one thing and adding to one execution of a product. That's what can make it scary. That's what makes horror. Same with kills as well. Kills are more important than jump scares as well, because they can add to something. They add to a killer's body count and the overall aura of a killer and why they're so sadistic, etc., etc. Jump scares is kind of like, oh, boom, oh shit, you scared us for a millisecond. Oh, it's over. Like it leads to nothing at all. A character getting scared repeatedly, it doesn't add to anything. I'm all for jump scares if, one, they can somehow add to the story or add to a character. I think it more so is effective to an antagonist character than it is a protagonist character just getting scared all the time. For those jump scares with Michael and Jason and Freddy and, etc., etc., that can add to them. That can add to the horror and the sadistic nature of that type of character. With these, it adds nothing. Like, it adds completely nothing. A character getting scared. Other than, oh, this place is scary. But you can do that in more effective ways and better ways. And this movie kind of already shows you that she's slowly realizing that she's in trouble and everything isn't what it seems. So you don't need jump scares to tell us that she's experiencing these stuff. So I'll rant about it, but I had a rant on my imaginary episode because that was the same bullshit in that movie as well when I covered it as well. So just had to do another rant here just in case you didn't hear that rant in the imaginary episode. I needed to do this one. I'm just getting so sick and tired of it, and I feel as though when I watched the first Omen, that's going to be riddled with jump scares as well. I just hope they're a bit more original and also just effective to the story itself. But anyway, rant over. There were some cool scenes of it though, like the old nun that is brought up in the start of the movie. This kind of just creeps around and just kind of scares people because she's always just in places she shouldn't be, and she's, I think, pretty much, she's not non-verbal because she does talk towards the end, but she doesn't really talk a lot and doesn't make a sense a lot. There was a scene where Sydney Sweeney's in bed and there's a slide pan to the doorway, and it wasn't a jump scare, but this is what I mean. Like, these scenes can be more effective than jump scares, so do more of this shit. We're focusing on Sydney Sweeney in bed. It's a mid-distance shot, and then it slowly pans to the doorway, and this old lady's just creepily standing there. Sydney Sweeney panics, turns the light on, and she's gone. Okay, cool. That's not a split-second jump scare. That's a cool little creepy scene, setting the tone of why Sydney Sweeney will get out of bed to look for this woman and realise that there's some creepy shit going on here, you know? So I like scenes like that because they're leading to something and they're helping telling an overall arcing story. So that was really cool. That was well done. That was, quite creepy. I thought that old actress did a very good job at being that type of character. The learning chores montage between Sydney Sweeney's character and I think it's Gwen that later gets her tongue cut off. They're sitting in the dining hall and they're getting told that, oh, we're going to, learn some shit from me from this old grumpy bloody, not old, but just grumpy nun. And it's a weird montage of them learning all these different jobs to kind of quite joyful music. And it's kind of, these scenes can be pulled off in horror movies because they're done for a reason, whatever that reason is. They're all kind of specific to their own movie. But this one I just felt out of place and didn't really achieve a lot other than just feel like it was out of place. Like it should have been like a rom-com or like a family movie because they're learning all these chores and like I said, there's joyful music playing. Quite odd, and it didn't ruin the movie for me by any means, but it just felt weird. Like I was asking myself, why would this scene be in this movie? If you know and if you think it had a place in this movie, please let me know in the comments or leave a review or whatever. I'm actually really intrigued to see what people's opinions are on this scene. But the scene I'm talking about is they're learning all their chores / jobs they're doing. So they're like hanging clothes and washing clothes and cleaning and attending to the elder nuns that are on their deathbeds and all that type of stuff. So very interested to hear everyone else's opinion on that. There was some, like I said, there was some good scenes of her. Sorry for the weird pause. I was kind of just really thinking hard. People might think their bloody stream's crashing. Nah, it's just my brain crashing. There was a scene of when she's already pregnant. We know she's pregnant. She knows she's pregnant, and she vomits in the toilet. And a tooth comes out. And it's kind of like, oh, wow, is her body rejecting this? And that's when it starts to tell you that she's having questions herself, and you, the audience, should be having these questions while she's pregnant. And, is this a bad thing? Blah, blah, blah. So all the negatives I'll talk about this movie, that I've already spoken about, and more negatives I'll talk about in a second. These scenes are good because it's showing you slowly that she's deteriorating in health, physically and mentally as well, and that there's some more creepy, terrible shit that's happening and that's about to happen as well. And when she is announced that she's pregnant and that they believe her that she is a virgin, because obviously there's a doctor there, I think he checked that she was a virgin, so believed her. And there's a scene of her in the church and she's pretty much being celebrated. Sorry, I don't know much about religion at all, so there's probably like a term for this or something, but she's all dressed up in a gown. They're all kind of celebrating at this ceremony the fact that she's pregnant, and then, she's had Immaculate Conception, that she's, could be carrying the next Messiah and stuff like that. And she's got this veil thing on. She's got this nice big pretty dress on, and there's this harmonizing music playing, and she looks visibly distraught and sad. Like she's I'm not happy with this. I don't know what's happening. I feel really uncomfortable. This isn't normal. Why they're celebrating this, etc., etc. So that was a good way to show that from the get-go she didn't feel right being pregnant, and she didn't feel okay about it at all. That was quite a creepy scene. Kind of that's when you start to have a bit more feelings for her character and kind of can relate to her a little bit. At first, that was a big problem I had was, and look, I know a lot of movies are like this because she's obviously the main character, but we only really, outside the opening scene of that other woman getting buried alive, we don't really see any other characters in their own element at all, except if they're in a scene with Sydney Sweeney. So I feel as though if you're going to do that, you need to be better with the dialogue, you need to be better with the character development, because you're not giving these characters their own screen time, which is fine. I feel as though the only character that I kind of related to and liked was Gwen, but again, she was only ever in scenes with Sydney Sweeney until she was getting her tongue cut out by the nuns, and then she was obviously killed and then buried in the catacombs. So, yeah, like the priest and the... I don't even know what you call the other characters. Like I said, I apologise for the lack of knowledge around religion in general. But, yeah, you had your cardinal, the doctor, there's deacon, Father Sal Tedeschi, I think. I probably pronounced that wrong, which I apologise. But, yeah, there was something off from him. I mean, the actor did a really good job of still somehow being likeable to begin with, but then quite early on you knew that he was hiding something more sinister about himself and about the convent in general. But yeah, just in terms of characters, I just didn't feel much, I'm afraid. And when you're doing a movie like this, it's very character driven for at least the first, I want to say 65-70% of the movie, until it gets into the climax and action with the violence and the gore. Because a lot of people, like I said, to be watching this because it's R-rated, say no, okay, there's going to be violence and some shenanigans. I'm going to watch it for that because that's my type of horror, which is fine. But you need to keep them invested until that stuff happens. If you're not having that stuff happen earlier, then you need to invest them in different ways, kind of tease certain deaths, showing these, I don't know, weapons or these type of different things that kind of are foreshadowing what's going to happen to characters. But this movie didn't really do that, unfortunately. So yeah, if you're into your gore and your violence and that's the type of horror watcher you are, then you may have turned this movie off before that stuff happens, because, that there wasn't much else that was going to keeping you kind of occupied. I don't know if that's the right word, but occupied until that stuff kind of happens. Because I know quite a few horror fans that they are only really interested in the violence and the gore of it, not because they're sadistic and just love seeing people killed. It's more so, I know one of them that he wants to be a filmmaker when he gets a bit older and stuff, so he likes what deaths and stuff look like on screen and how that was achieved behind the scenes, etc., etc. So yeah, there's all different type of horror fans out there, and I'm probably a bit more broader in what I want to watch. I like horror movies that are different, and if they're not different inside a subgenre, then I want to see how they're differentiating from other movies inside that subgenre. So that wasn't a mindfuck for you. But everyone's different. Hey, I know there's people who probably love this movie, and that's great. I think there's at least one person for every horror movie that loves it, at least. I know people that loved Imaginary, so that tells you one fucking thing. So yeah, look, there were the violent scenes were pretty fucking full on. Like they were pretty gory, I have to say. There's scenes where people's heads are getting caved in, and Gwen's tongue getting cut off was quite gruesome, and that was quite cool, I think, because you saw it happen from Sydney Sweeney's perspective of through the crack in the door, and so it's from like a distance, not a super long distance. You can still see what's happening, but it was POV shot from Sydney Sweeney's point of view. So that was cool. I did like the way they did that. When you're killing these characters, especially Gwen, even though I cared for her and like related to her to a small degree, it didn't do anything by the end of it. Like, I didn't really care too much because the character development wasn't there for her, and less so for other characters in the movie. So when you're giving these characters gruesome deaths and whatnot, that just doesn't always hit, and majority of the time it doesn't hit. And Gwen's death didn't really do much. The old nun, I forgot her name and forgot her overall what do you call it? Her overall bloody title. I don't know. She gets hit in the head with the crucifix. That was pretty gruesome. Her face and head gets caved in by Sydney Sweeney to a degree. And I was kind of questioning, was Sydney Sweeney's character, like when she finally snaps, was that built up properly? And I think in hindsight, it was built up enough. Like, I won't shit on that side of the character development on her part. But then again, if you're focusing so much on her and she's pretty much in every scene of this movie, then you'd hope that that was the case. Because if that wasn't, then the execution was overall horrible. But like I kept saying, that the performances were overall, quite good. But we just didn't see enough of it to sink our teeth into, unfortunately. Like I said, the catacomb scene towards the end of the movie, like in the climax of Sydney Sweeney escaping, getting chased by the father, Sal, was, really cool. I thought those catacombs were very creepy, well done. I don't know if they were built for the movie to look old and creepy, or they were existing ones to make look older. I'm not sure, but I thought it was really, really cool, that scene. With majority, you can only really hear his voice. He's calling out to her, and his voice is affected by being set on fire. So that was really creepy. That was really cool. And then when she sees Gwen's tongue cut off, I thought the body of Gwen was quite realistic. Realistic enough, anyway. And then we get to... So my voice just cut into a weird voice. Yeah. Anyway, so we get to the most probably dramatic and talked about scene of the movie, or it's going to be the most talked about scene of the movie, is when she escapes. She kills the father quite gruesomely as well. She then gives birth. Then the first gruesome part of this scene is she bites her own umbilical cord, which is pretty full on. And then we don't really ever see the baby except for a blurry long shot, out of focus shot, I should say, when she goes to grab the rock. But we hear something isn't right because it's gurgling. It's kind of making a growling type noise, and it's also battling to get air. Then she stumbles off, gets a rock, and then kills it. And then the movie cuts and finishes. Oh, look, I'm not for babies and kids in general getting killed in movies, especially in like gruesome ways. I know that it was off camera, off scene, but you heard it. It was insinuated strongly. I don't know, just didn't sit well with me. And look, I'm not saying I'm woke. I'm not saying that, they're showing too much in horror movies, like they're ruining people's lives and causing violence. Just me personally, it didn't sit well and didn't hit. And I think that majority is because, like I've said already, that the movie wasn't developed properly in terms of character development, also story, and all these things, parts of the puzzle that weren't done properly. This ending just fell flat because of it, because it's such a full-on, like, ram down your throat, fucking right in your face type ending. It didn't hit because it just felt as though they were just going for a shock ending just because they wanted to end on a shock to be talked about or whatever, or they think a shock ending is going to make a movie good. I've seen a lot of people say, The Mist is only a good movie because of the shock ending. I'm like, no, the shock ending fit that movie fucking perfectly. This ending just, I don't know if it didn't fit the movie or the execution was off, or I think it's more so what I've already stated, is that the movie itself didn't hit, so the ending didn't hit. That's all I can really say on that, honestly. I mean, like, they swung for the fences. They went for a dramatic ending, and, a lot of these endings are talked about, and that's why movies get talked about, not so much the movie itself being good. But you can have both. I mean, The Mist is literally a perfect example of that, of a shock ending, a massively shock ending, but the movie being good as well. And this, unfortunately, just wasn't that. I just feel as though this movie just lacked, and when you're getting bored in a movie that goes for an hour and a half, like I did, that's just really not a good sign at all, especially for a horror movie. Drama movies and stuff, you can expect that if that's not really your cup of tea, or if it's a bit of a slow burn. But this wasn't marketed as a slow burn horror movie, and it's not a slow burn horror movie. It's quite, in terms of pace, it's quite high octane from at least 25% onwards, and from the start, and then it slows down and then gears off from there. So, feel as though the ending just didn't hit. That's going to probably upset a lot of people. It's also going to probably make a lot of people happy, not happy in terms of what happened in the scene, but happy that filmmakers are still allowed to do these types of scenes to try and tell a story and to try and shock the audience. I'm all for it. Just make sure your movie hits if you're going to try and do an ending like that. But that's probably where I'll leave the movie review at here. I'll land the plane and get into the trivia, and then we'll get into rating the movie, and we'll see what the rating goes from there. But yeah, look, I'm really interested to see if you guys love this movie, if you hated it, if you thought it was mid, whatever you thought about it. Leave your I can't even speak. Leave your opinions in the comments or in a review for this episode on whatever platform you're listening to. I'm really intrigued to see what people's opinions are. Like, I really, really am. I think it's going to divide a lot of horror fans, definitely. But yeah, here's some trivia. So, Sydney Sweeney auditioned for this film in 2014 when she was 17, but the project never materialised. Years later, she took on a role of a producer and reached out to the writer, acquired and revised the script, hired a director, found financiers, and sold the film to Neon. So, this is the part I fucking love. Like, this is great. And horror has a lot of these types of stories, and I think it's really, really cool, and it's great for the genre. It's great for fans. So, Sydney Sweeney obviously loved this movie from the get-go 10 years ago when she was 17. That's crazy to me. And it's taken this long. Obviously, she has a bit more fanfare behind her now. She has a bit more pull in Hollywood. So she was able to get all this happen, get the script rewritten, get a director, and got the movie financed. $9 million is a really good budget to get financed. So awesome work to Sydney. Awesome work. In an interview with IMDb, Sydney revealed her grandmas appear in both church scenes. She explained, in both of the church scenes where I'm walking with the candle down the aisle, they're in the first two rows. And then in the scene where I'm being crowned and everybody in the congregation singing, they're standing in front row next to Mother Superior. Oh, wow, that's pretty cool. Kind of a weird movie to cast your grandmas in, but oh well. Michael Mahan previously directed Sydney Sweeney in The Voyeurs and the TV show Everything Sucks. So I did know that previously. They've obviously got a good working relationship. So that's always good. Two saints are mentioned in the film. The convent is said to be built over the catacombs holding Saint Stephen and Saint Helena. Is named as the person who brought the stake from the cross back from the Holy Lands. Saint Stephen is considered the very first Christian martyr, a deacon appointed by Paul of the original 12 apostles. Stephen was stoned to death shortly after the resurrection of Christ for blasphemy after giving a speech condemning Jewish authorities. Relics of Saint Stephen were brought and interred in Italy. Saint Helena was the mother of Emperor Constantine I. She went on a pilgrimage tour of the Holy Lands to build churches and collect holy relics around 276-7 AD. According to Christian tradition, she discovered the true cross Jesus was crucified upon while on this pilgrimage, along with the nails of crucifixion and many other relics. Sydney Sweeney and Simona Tabasco both appeared on The White Lotus, but on different seasons. Oh, that's pretty cool. The climactic single take giving birth scene was done in 2 takes, but the first one was used in the movie. Yeah, right, okay. I'll be intrigued on what the other take was. Not only this movie was released at the same time as the first Omen, but is also set in Italy and has the exact same premise. I mean, that was obviously put in by a fan because that's kind of weird. But I've already stated that they came out at the same time. But yeah, there's a term. I think it's movie twins. I mean, there's heaps of them in the past. Volcano, Dante's Peak, heaps and heaps. And I hope that doesn't let people, ruin their enjoyment of this movie if they watch the first Omen first. I'm going to watch them both. I'm going to review them separately. I'm going to view them as separate films. Even though I might compare them like here and there because it's easier to compare things when you're trying to review a movie. But I'm going to watch them as different products because that's what they are, So, yeah, so we'll get into our final ratings and review of the film as we do on Goose Talks Film. We are rating the movie out of 4 categories, out of 5, and that gives it an overall rating outside of 20. And that goes towards the end of the year top 10 and bottom 10 list, where the top 10 highest rated movies will be listed. and then the bottom 10 will be listed in terms of their ratings. And as I said earlier, some movies will be left off. All these movies that are on those lists at the end of the year are only movies I've covered on the podcast. I can't cover everything, but hopefully I cover majority of the big ones, and we'll, go from there. The 4 categories that we rate are directing, writing, acting, and cinematography. And the directing of this movie, look, it in terms of direction, could have been done better, but it could have been done worse. I've already talked about the scenes I liked and the scenes I didn't like. 2.5 out of 5, I think it's pretty fair. 50% on directing, I think, is really fair. The writing, everyone knows I'm harsh on the writing, but the character development wasn't great, like I've already said a million times on this review. But, I mean, the dialogue was good enough. We didn't get, like, a shit ton of, exposition dumps or anything like that. The story itself was quite cohesive. Like, you didn't get lost, you didn't get confused. You knew what story they were trying to tell. It was just more so the execution, which goes more down to the directing and writing. So I go 2.5 out of 5 for writing. The acting, I thought Sydney Sweeney did a really good job. I thought she really excelled in the emotional scenes. And when she's screaming and stuff at the end when she gives birth, I think that would have taken a lot out of her, because she was screaming straight for a couple of minutes, and they did 2 takes of it. So probably would have been over 4 or 5 minutes of her screaming in a row. So that's pretty impressive. And like I said, the rest of the cast were really good at acting, but we just didn't get to see a lot of them, and the character development kind of stilted them a little bit. But the acting, I'll go 2.75. I thought that was probably the highlight, along with the cinematography, which I'll also give it 2.75. I thought the lighting stuff was good. Like, the very opening scene, like I've already said, was good in the sense of it was showing you how dark and secluded it was, because there was no lights or lighting in the background. You saw how secluded it was, but yet we still could see what was going on, and the fog was really, really cool. So there was some really good shots in the hallway and the catacombs. Like, they were dark enough to make it realistic that this character is really in this environment, but also you could see what's going on. So I think that was good, but in saying that, there wasn't a lot of establishing shots. I feel as though some shots were held for too long, like in the one frame. So 2.75, I think is definitely fair for this movie. And that gives an overall score out of 20 of 10.5, which is fairly decent for this movie, I have to say, compared to Imaginary. But it's definitely on the lower end of things, without revealing all the previous scores. With as you listen to the podcast yourself, you'll kind of get an idea of what movies are down the bottom and which ones are on top if you listen to majority of the episodes. But that's pretty much where I'll end the podcast. I'd like to, as always, thank you guys for listening. If you listen to the this long, we've almost been doing it an hour. So, thank you for listening this long. Thank you if you can only listen to bits and parts, but that's fine. And like I said, please let me know. Even send me a DM, leave a review, comment on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, whatever you listen to this on. I'd really like to get other people's opinions on the movie. And if you disagree with me, agree, or there's movies you want me to cover, please let me know. I love reaching out to other people and people reaching out to me. So, as always, make sure you're following Goose Talks Film on all platforms. And wherever you're listening to this on, I'm still currently trying to be put on Apple Podcasts, but just with my account and trying to sign in and out and claiming this podcast is just such a headache compared to all the other podcast catchers. Excuse me, so easy. This is not. But thank you so much for listening, guys. And as always, make sure you watch those movies. I'll catch you later.